Welcome back. I've got my candle going and I'm ready to dive in. Today's lesson, we're asking the big question, what are Jesus' miracles all about? What are Jesus' miracles all about? And our big idea for today is that Jesus' miracles show us that Jesus is God. Jesus' miracles show us that Jesus is God. Scene one, through the roof. Here we go. So Jesus and his disciples traveled to his hometown of Nazareth. And when Jesus entered the synagogue, that was the Jewish place of worship, he was asked to read a portion of the scripture from the prophet Isaiah, which we know is the Hebrew Bible. So Jesus stood up, he unrolled the scroll, and he read this. God's Spirit is upon me, giving me power to help those in need. I will bring hope to the poor and the prisoners. The blind will now see. The abused, the hurting, the forgotten will be set free. This is the year. This is the time of God's blessing. And after this, Jesus sat down because that was custom before commenting on the scriptures. And the people looked at Jesus, anticipating his response. And after a moment, Jesus said this. The scripture is being fulfilled right in front of you. This is why I've come. Now, at this time, poverty was really common because the Roman government imposed these really horrible taxes on people, and many struggled daily to find food, and disease and sickness were widespread. So Jesus traveled throughout the villages and in the area, teaching people about God's kingdom. And Jesus felt this deep compassion for all the people. So Jesus healed people from all kinds of illnesses, even raised 2 people from the dead. One time, crowds were surrounding Jesus everywhere he went, and people found out where Jesus was staying, and they came and packed every room. There wasn't space for one more person, even outside the door. And so as Jesus is teaching about God's kingdom, 4 people brought their paralyzed friend on a mat to see Jesus, believing that Jesus would heal their friend. But the only way they could get their friend inside the house was to climb up on the roof and dig a hole through the clay towers and then lower him down. And when Jesus saw the hole in the roof, he was impressed with the effort and the faith of these men. And Jesus looked at the paralyzed man laying in front of him, and he said, everything you've done is forgiven. Everything you've done is forgiven. Now, some of the religious leaders, they were watching and listening to Jesus, and they were offended by what Jesus had said and asked each other, who does this man think he is? Only God can forgive sins. But Jesus knew. He knew what they were thinking. And he asked them, why are you so offended? Would you rather I just healed him and not offered forgiveness? I'll prove to you that I have power beyond healing, power to heal, power to forgive every kind of evil. So then Jesus told the man, stand up, pick up your mat, walk home, you're healed. The man, he jumped up and he was no longer paralyzed. He pushed past the crowd, he ran out the door and he ran right home, and people were filled with wonder and amazement. They thanked God and they said, we have never seen anything like this. Scene 2, feeding the multitudes. So during his travels, Jesus sent his disciples out in pairs to the nearby villages, giving them the power to heal and to teach others about God's kingdom. And when they returned, they told Jesus about all of the great things that God had done through them. And Jesus said, whew, let's go to a quiet place where, we can rest for a while. The people had surrounded them all day, so much so that Jesus and the disciples didn't even have time to eat. So they get in their boat and they go to find a secluded field where they could rest. But you see, the crowds spotted them and ran along the side of the shore and ran ahead of them, so that when Jesus stepped out of the boat, there was this huge crowd already gathered in the field. Now, Jesus felt compassion for these people, and knowing that they just needed someone to lead them and to care for them. So Jesus began teaching them about God's ways, and it was getting kind of late in the day. And Jesus' disciples started pleading with him. "We are in a remote place," they said. "Send the crowds away to the nearby farms to get something to eat." But Jesus says to the disciples, "You feed them. You feed them." And the disciples are like, "Oh, with what, Jesus? We would have to work for months and months and months and months to buy enough food for this crowd. We only brought 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish." So Jesus, he told the disciples, divide the crowd into the groups of 50 or 100 and just get them to sit down in groups, okay? Jesus took the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, and he looked up to the sky and asked God to bless the food. And then Jesus broke the bread into pieces and he passed it to the disciples to give to the crowd. And Jesus also divided the fish for everyone to share. And they just kept giving food out until finally everyone in the crowd had eaten as much as they wanted. And guys, there were 12 baskets of leftovers. 12 baskets from 5 fish, 5 loaves of bread, and 2 fish. You see, thousands were fed that day. Some say as many as 5,000 families. And wherever Jesus went, in the villages, in the cities, across the countryside, people always pressed in to be close to them. So people carried the sick and the cripple, and they begged Jesus just to touch them. Jesus felt this great compassion for the people and healed them. One time, Jesus explained where his powers to perform these miracles came from. Jesus said this, I don't do any of this on my own. It's God that gives me the power to heal, to raise the dead, and give life. Those who believe in me will find new life that's God's and that will never end. Here's another miracle story. This time it's called Calming the Storm. So on another day, after a long day of teaching, Jesus asked his disciples to take him in the boat across the lake so they could get away for a while. And as they set off, Jesus was so exhausted. So he went to the back of the boat. He put his head on a cushion and he fell asleep. All of a sudden, this violent storm blew in with rain, and the storm was blowing and waves crashing inside the boat. And even some of the disciples, these disciples who were experienced fishermen, they couldn't keep the boat from filling with water. So the disciples ran to the back of the boat, panicking, and they waked Jesus up, shouting, "Don't you care? Don't you care that we're going to drown?" Jesus woke up. He stood up and he turned to the water and he said, "Quiet, be still." Instantly, the wind stopped blowing and the lake became calm. And Jesus asked his disciples, "Why were you so afraid? Don't you believe in me yet?" The disciples, they were filled with wonder, and they asked each other, "Who is this man that even the wind and the water listen to him?"